It's not uncommon for pet owners to describe their animals as displaying unique personalities, whether it be dogs, cats, rodents, reptiles, or birds. But when it comes to chickens, it may seem easy for most of us to brush their behavior off as walking future roast dinners. Their brains focused on solely two things: putting one foot in front of the other, and pecking at anything that looks remotely edible. Whether this is true or not, and I'm not so sure it is, in my time at Pennyhook's farm, a few of the chickens have indeed displayed personality traits that I just can't dismiss. Do they actually have personalities? Well, let's see about that. It's hard to talk about the Pennyhook's chickens and not at some point talk about a certain notorious duo. They go by many names: Ronnie and Reggie, Cain and Abel, Remus and Romulus, Fred and George. But most of us just call them the Brothers. Their names may be many, but they share a single goal: attack all humans. They were raised together along with many other incubated chicks, and as a result they are rather amicable with each other, though the same cannot be said for any human that their sharp eyes catch sight of. The way they move has been described as akin to the raptors of Jurassic Park, patrolling the boundaries of their enclosure, working as a two-bird pack. No legs are off limits to their attacks. Not only that, contact with their remarkably tough bodies have turned the sturdiest weaponry into floppy duds. Why then have we kept such ferocious fowl on the farm? Well, we weren't, not originally. But then we discovered their crippling weakness. They hate brooms. No, seriously, just brandish a broom at them. Show them you aren't afraid of them, and then they back off. This enormous rooster is called Carruthers. At 5 years old, he is the oldest rooster on the farm. When I first came to the farm, I'd heard tales about how Carruthers used to chase and kick at any human who dared step into his domain. I wonder if he's the father of a certain dreadful duo. With spurs like the ones he sports, it was no surprise that he was kept contained in his own enclosure, with his own little house, and even his own hen, whom Irene has nicknamed Carruthers' wife. Nowadays, Carruthers is much mellower, and is even allowed to roam free, like the other chickens. But that's not to say he can't and doesn't remind all the other birds that he's the big boss around here. Unlike Carruthers in many ways, this little rooster is named Mickey. I don't really know how he came to be called Mickey. He certainly doesn't bear any resemblance to a certain cartoon mouse. Despite growing up alongside the brothers, Mickey is far more docile. But he does want to be the boss, just like Carruthers. You can see it every time he puffs up his chest, stands as tall as he can stretch, and sings out to the world. Unfortunately, he's too small and timid to take down Carruthers, something the big boss has no qualms reminding him about. Luckily, Mickey is both swift and sensible, and stays out of trouble as best he can. Well, that's all the roosters. Now on to the hens. Let's start with the oldest, Old Lady Bampton the Bantam. Even at 14 years old, she's sturdier than she looks, having had to put up with a number of rowdy roosters in her time. But she's normally a shy soul who barely makes any noise. Bampton does like to hang around the two old goats, Billy and Hiccup, who tolerate her more than they do any of the other chickens. This is most likely because, during the winter, Bampton and the goats stayed under a heated lamp in the goat shed together. After sharing so many cold winter days in the warmth of the shed's lamp, Bampton now seems more at home with the goats than with her own kind. Bampton's name sounds a lot like the name of her chicken species, the bantam. This is no accident, as when I was told that everyone just called her the old lady bantam, I misheard it as old lady badminton. Yes, I know, it sounds like a silly mistake to make. But even when that mistake was eventually cleared up, I misheard it again as Bampton instead of bantam. Yet by the time the second mistake was addressed, I'd already introduced her many times as Old Lady Bampton. So in the end, she just became known as Old Lady Bampton the Bantam because I misheard it twice. This hen is called Mumphrey. She's a smart one. She knows all the food is stored in the big metal box that we call the silver tank. When nobody is looking, and if the silver tank's lid is left up, Mumphrey tries to climb up and find a way in, and have herself a private feast. Good thing we remember to close that lid, otherwise Mumphrey would probably be the fattest chicken in England. But why is she called Mumphrey? Well, unlike Mickey, I do know how she was named. Both of her parents were a rare breed of the marsh daisy. Her mother was called Maisie, and her father was a big rooster named Humphrey. So her name is a combination of her parents' names. She's an adventurous type, so you're likely to see her around the farm. And there's an easy way to identify Mumphrey out of all the other chickens. She's the only white hen that lacks a crest on her head. Speaking of head-related features, there's one fancy-looking hen who deserves a mention. Believe it or not, her name is Elvis. And no, she is not Elvis Presley reborn as a chicken. We know because she doesn't sing or live on the moon. She is so called because of that fancy hairdo she's got. Or feather do, in her case. Over here, in this cozy coop, live a pair of 12-year-old Dutch bantams called Millie and Lily. And no, they are not recently hatched chicks, they are fully grown hens. Dutch bantams are one of the smallest known breeds of chicken. They were let out of their little house by accident once, but they didn't go too far. In fact, they actually returned and stayed inside their house and haven't bothered venturing out since. I guess they just prefer an inside life over an outside one. Millie and Lily are rather noisy though, and will call to us when they're hungry, or when their water bowl is dry. Talking of small chickens, it's no secret that several chicks were recently incubated and hatched on the farm. Raised in person by Irene, these chicks have been described by her as each having their own little personalities. Acting as their mother, Irene has been trying to train them to behave, as nobody wants to deal with another bunch of birds like the brothers anytime soon. Aside from the chicks that Irene has raised, I mentioned earlier that one hen who shared a shed with the brothers had recently hatched 8 eggs. Well, despite not even having a name yet, that hen has already made quite an impression. Before she and her chicks were moved up to this safe location at Appletree House, a red kite flew over the brothers' enclosure and kept swooping down trying to attack the chicks. But this hen, she wouldn't have any of it. She shielded her 8 chicks with her own body against the red kite's attacks. Again and again, that red kite dive-bombed her, trying to snatch one of her chicks. But she held out long enough until finally the red kite was sent packing by the arrival of some concerned humans. Back to the question I asked at the start. Do chickens actually have personalities? On that note, though, do dogs have personalities? Or cats? Do humans have personalities? Is the act of personification just a psychological trick that our brain plays on us? Honestly, who can tell at this point? After being around this feathered cast for so long, it's hard to argue that they don't have some degree of a personality.